What's going on, guys? In this tutorial I'm going to walk you through how to use the Abstract Painter photo effect for Photoshop. So here's an example of the effect that the tool creates for you. I'll show you a few more examples and we'll get into it. So this is the photo I'll be using in the tutorial. I'll put a link down to this photo below if you want to follow along. So the first thing you want to check is the resolution of your image. So if you go to image size, make sure you're working with a high resolution photo. I recommend taking the longest dimension and increasing it or decreasing it into the range of 4,000 to 5,000 pixels. So this is a good size here. So I'm going to click OK. Next, what we need to do is load the brushes and patterns that were included in the download. So the easiest way to do this is just to go to File, Open, then navigate to the Abstract Painter folder that was included in the download, and you'll have two folders here, brushes, and I've just got in brackets here, must be loaded into Photoshop, just to remind you, and the patterns. So if you just go inside the brushes, you can double click on the Abstract Painter brushes.abr file. Now that is loaded into Photoshop. So if you hit B on the keyboard and then right click anywhere over your photo, this will bring up the brushes panel and you should see the Abstract Painter brushes here. Another way to load the brushes is just to click on this icon and click import brushes and then again navigate to the brush file. Next, let's load the patterns. So again, go to File, Open, or Control or Command O, navigate to the patterns folder. Patterns must be loaded into Photoshop, and then double click on that, and then the patterns will load up. So to view the patterns, you can hit G, okay, or just the paint bucket tool here. And up the top here, you've got, it might be set to foreground for you, but you can flip it back to pattern, and then you click on this, and you can see the patterns here. Next, what we need to do is load up the Actions panel. So if you go to the Window menu, click on Actions, it should pop up to the side here. Next, what you want to do is click on this icon and go to Load Actions. Navigate back to the Abstract Painter folder, and you should see the Abstract Painter by Sevenstyles.atn here. So you double click on that, and it will now load into the Actions panel. So you can see that it loads up this folder, and if you open this folder, there's a bunch of different actions here, but all of these below these two lines here, you don't need to touch any of those. Okay, so it's basically these two that we're interested in, but this is the main action that we want to play first. This one here is just a setup reminder, just reminding you if you haven't used the action in a while, just to load the brushes, load the patterns. This one will go through a little later on in the tutorial, but we'll start off by playing the action. Now, just a reminder before we play the action that you cannot rename this folder, otherwise the action will break. You cannot rename any of these actions either. So all you need to do is select the top action here, Play Abstract Painter, and then click the play button. Now there will be 4 pop-up windows which will guide you through to the completion of the action. So we'll go through them one by one. They're very simple. I won't bother about reading all the instructions. We'll just read the title and I'll demonstrate what you need to do. So step 1 is to create the texture overlay. So when you get this pop-up window, all you need to do is click Continue, and the layer style window will then pop up, okay? And you'll notice that the pattern overlay checkbox is selected. Now what you want to do here is click on the pattern thumbnail here, click on this icon, and what you want to do is just click on one of the patterns that you just loaded up into Photoshop. So we'll just select this first pattern here, and what you can do then is you can scale the texture up and down, okay? You don't want to scale it too low because you'll begin to see repetition in the pattern. This is a seamless texture, a seamless pattern, but if you scale it right down, yeah, you're going to see more and more repetition. So a good range is probably between 50 to 100%. You can also click and drag to move the texture around, okay? And you can also adjust the opacity here. So we'll just keep this pretty low. You can also experiment with changing the blend mode, so I can change that to like overlay, and then you can see that it interacts with your photo in a different way. So let's just keep it overlay. Let's turn this down a little bit. So all we need to do when you've adjusted the settings here is click OK. Now just a reminder that you must have at least 1% opacity and you must have selected a texture. Okay, there's options in the layers after the action is completed to shut off the texture if you don't want it, but you must have at least 1% texture. All right, let's click OK. And then the next step is allowing you just to brush away any texture details that you don't want. So step 2, remove any unwanted texture. So all you need to do here is click stop, and you'll notice that the brush is selected for you. So if there's any textures that you don't want, you can start brushing just to remove them. Okay, you can hit Control or Command Z to undo it. And another way to undo it is if I'm brushing, if I hit X, that will flip my brush to a white brush, and then I can start revealing the texture again. Flipping it to black, hit X again, that will erase it. So you can just adjust that here. So this could be handy if you wanted, say you've got a portrait subject where the background is very plain. You want a lot of texture in the background, but not so much texture over the subject's face. So you can basically just brush away the texture over the subject's face and then keep a lot of the texture detail in the background. So when you've brushed away any texture you don't want, all you need to do is click the play button in the actions panel, and then the action will resume. So the next step 3 will pop up in about 30 seconds time. So I'll just skip the video ahead and get to that point. Well, that only took about 5 seconds, but here is step 3, texture brush settings. So what you will notice at this stage is that your brush settings window should automatically pop up at the same time that this message window pops up. So you can see my brush setting window has popped up here. Now, if it hasn't appeared for you, what you want to do is go to the window menu and then select brush settings. So let's go through this step now. So what you want to do is click stop here. And there are 3 things that we need to adjust within the texture option here. So if you're not seeing the brush settings window, okay, you want to go to window, brush settings, all right? So the first step here is to click on the texture option, and you want to make sure that the lock symbol is on, okay? So this step is very important. So you might not have used this option before, but you want to click on the lock symbol to make sure that is on. And what that's going to do, that's going to ensure that the changes that we make within this texture option are applied across to all the other brushes that we loaded up into Photoshop. All right. So with the lock symbol on, what you want to do is click on this black thumbnail here, and there should be a thumbnail of your photo within the pattern options here. So you see here is my photo here. Okay. If you're not seeing these as large thumbnails, you can click on this icon and just select large thumbnail. Okay, so these were the textures that we loaded up, and here is the snapshot of your photo. So this is very important that you select the photo that you're currently using. The next step is to ensure that invert is turned off. Okay, so if invert is turned on for you, make sure that is turned off. Okay, so we'll go through those steps again. All right, I'll just undo all this and I'll just select something different. So the first step is to turn the lock symbol on. Second step is to click on this thumbnail and select the photo thumbnail that you're currently using. And the third step is to make sure that invert is turned off. All right. Now, when you've done that, all you need to do is click the actions panel, click the play icon, and then play the action, and that will resume. So there's just one more step. It's a very simple step which will happen in about 1 minute's time. So I will skip the video forward and we'll get to that point. So here is the final step, step 4, click invert. So what you want to do here is just click stop. And again, the brush settings window should have automatically popped open for you. So if it hasn't, go to the window menu, brush settings. Now all you need to do in this step is make sure that invert is turned on. Okay, so we're going to turn that on. And when you've done that, just click the play icon to bring up the actions panel. And again, just click play to resume the action. So that's it. The action's now going to complete. It will take about 1 to 2 minutes from here. So I'll skip the video ahead and we'll get to the result. All right, at this stage, the action is complete. Step 5 is an optional step. it's called free paint. So what you can do here is just click continue. All right, so the action is finished, so you'll have your result. So at this stage, we will just collapse the actions panel. So you can just collapse that. We'll come back to this one soon, and you can collapse the actions panel. So that last message, that step 5 message about free paint, you'll notice that this layer here is selected, this green layer, and it's called free paint, and I've got in brackets here, press Y and start brushing. So the first thing we might do is just collapse all these folders. So if you hold down Control Alt or Command Option and just click on any one of these folder arrows, that will collapse all the folders, and then you can reopen it so things are just a little bit neater. So with the free paint layer selected, you can just press Y on the keyboard, and then you can just start brushing over your artwork, and it will add additional paint strokes. Now you can use the left and right square brackets to increase or decrease the size of your brush. So if I make a really big brush here and start brushing, you can see what that's doing. So if you want to work on adding finer details to your artwork, use a very small brush, okay? And you can add in extra details. Now you can actually create any layer. So for example, I've got this one called free paint, but if I create a new layer, Control Shift N or Command Shift N, create a new layer, I can press Y on that layer and I can start brushing on that one as well. So you don't have to use just this one layer, you can actually create any new layer, okay? Now if you right click over your photo, bring up the brushes panel, these are the two brushes that you can use. By default, this is the one that's selected when you press Y, but you can also try this one as well, okay? So a few other things you can try while you have, it's called the Art History brush. So when you press Y, you're activating this brush here, the Art History brush. And you can also experiment with changing the blend mode of the brush. So if you want to sort of emphasize the shadows, the darker details in your artwork a little bit more, switch that to darken and then start brushing, okay? Now I like to create these on new layers. So if I want to now switch this to lighten, focus on the lighter areas, I'll create a new layer and then I'll just switch that to lighten and start brushing again. So this step here of I've just called it free painting, is completely optional, but it is handy if there's details missing from your default results. Say there's a little bit of detail missing from, say, your subject's mouth or eyes. You can use this free painting technique to add those details back in. Now if you twirl open the brushes panel here, the brush settings, you can also experiment with switching this, turning invert off, okay? That will target a broader range of tonal values in your photo. So with invert switched on, it will limit particularly the area of effect in the highlights of your photo. So you can see that it's not really having much of an effect in the clouds here, it's very subtle. But if I turn invert off and then brush again, you can see it's much more dramatic, okay? Now, if you want to erase what you've just brushed on, you can just hit E, okay? That'll bring out the eraser, you can brush that away. Or if there's just a area where you just don't want to free paint at all, you can apply a mask, okay? And with that mask selected, hit B, and you want to brush black onto that mask, okay? So wherever I brush black, that layer, I won't be able to free paint over that area. So now I'll hit Y again, I'll start brushing in this area, and nothing's happening because I've limited it to not show in that area. So just to demonstrate this free painting technique a bit more, what I'm going to do is just select the top folder here, and I'm going to create a new layer. So Control Shift N or Command Shift N, enter, and I want to fill this layer in white. So currently white is my background color. So to fill in a layer with a background color, you hold down Control backspace or Command backspace. That'll fill that white. So this is just my background for the moment, and I'm going to create another layer. So Control Shift N or Command Shift N. Now if I hit Y to activate the Art History brush, and I'll just set this back to normal for the moment. So now when I start brushing, I am revealing a our photo, okay? And like I said, you can use the left and right square brackets to adjust the size of the brush. So I'm using a smaller brush here to add in some finer details, okay? And I might create a new layer, and then I'll switch this to darken. So this just sort of emphasizes the shadows a bit more in your photo. Okay, and then I'll create another layer, and then I'll switch this to lighten. Okay, just like that. So if I just hide this this white background here, and I hide these other free paint layers I created, so you can see where we brushed here. And a little tip would be just to move these down below, down to around here, because our texture folder is sitting here. So the texture will sit on top of, and all these adjustment layers will sit on top of the layers that we just painted onto. So I'll go through these in a second. Now a little tip with, so I'll move these back to the top for a second. So let's say that we're just free painting here, and we want to restrict our entire abstract painter result to this area, okay? So what you might want to do is you hold down Control Shift and click on the 3 layers that I just created, okay? So I'll click on these 3. So I want to restrict the entire effect to only appear within this area. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select the Master Abstract Painter folder here, okay, and I will just fill in this selection with my foreground color, which is black. So to fill it in with a foreground color, it's Alt backspace or Option backspace. So what you'll see is it's actually filled in that area black. But what I want to do is I want to invert this color, invert these colors, because currently it's saying that we don't want to show any area in black, okay? But if I hit Control or Command I, invert it. So now anything within the Abstract Painter folder will only be visible within this white area. So I'll hide this background. So now I'll move these down here. The entire Abstract Painter result is restricted to this area. So let's just undo all that. I'm just going to delete this top layer. So to temporarily disable a mask, you hold down Shift and then click on the mask. So that will just put a big red X to it. And to release that, you just click on it again. So Shift click to disable it. So let's just delete all these extra free paint layers we created. I'll turn on this one here. And let's start going through some of these other folders. So let's start off with the texture overlays. So if you turn this on and off, you can see that that is the texture that you selected during the playback of the action, where the pop-up happened and you picked the texture that you wanted. So let's go inside this folder here and take a look what's in here. So I'll just turn these off for the moment. So this bottom one here, texture visibility 2, I've got in brackets opacity, so you can increase the opacity of the texture there. So the blend mode of this one is set to normal. I created two layers here because the blend mode of normal helps the texture become more visible on predominantly darker photos, or photos that are predominantly white. It can sort of help bring out a bit more texture. This top one here, the blend mode is set to overlay, so this will just interact with your photo in a different way. So you can just experiment with adjusting the opacity of those. So this one here is a texture bump 2. So these here are, so I'll zoom in a bit. So if I turn on these top 2, you can see that that's just added a bit of a bump to the texture. Now there's 2 different layers here. So texture bump 1, so this is more of just a subtle bump to the texture, and then this one here will add a bit more of an aggressive bump with a few more highlights and shadows. So you can adjust these if you want as well. You can just double click on these. Okay, this will bring up the layer style window, and you can click on bevel and emboss, and you can adjust the angle here. So you can spin that around, and then that will adjust the direction of the lighting. Okay, so you can see that updating there. You can also play around with the shadow amount, the highlight amount. Okay, so I'll zoom out here, Control or Command 0. Now, if you want to quickly affect the overall texture opacity, what I like to do is just select a folder and just drag down the opacity here. Okay, so if you want 50%, you can just hit 5 on the keyboard. That will quickly change that as well. Next, let's jump down to the Edge Highlights folder. So if I turn this on and off, you can see what that's doing. It just helps add a lot of definition into your photo. So you can use these masks to sort of isolate where you want effects to appear. So let's just say that I wanted to brush on exactly where I wanted them, these edge highlights to appear. What I could do is I could select the folder mask here, hit Control or Command I, flip that to black. So now everything inside this folder is hidden. Okay. So now I can hit B. Okay, make sure white is my active color, so I'll hit X to flip that to white. Now I can start brushing to add where I want those edge highlights. All right, but for now I'm just going to fill that all in white because we'll go inside this folder and talk about how I set this up. So let's start off with Edge Highlights 1. So Edge Highlights 1 are these white edge highlights that you will see when you've run the action. So you can see those there. So I've gone inside this folder. The way I've got this set up is the bottom layer is the edge highlights. The layer above is a solid color adjustment layer. So you can double click on this and change the color of those highlights if you want. But by default, they're at white. Okay, if you turn this off, you can use the Adjust Edge Brightness Levels Adjustment layer, and you can sort of boost the brightness of that area by using these handles here. Okay. So Edge Highlights 2, if I turn that on, is by default is adding sort of darker edge highlights. So I've gone inside this folder here. We've got this layer here, Adjust Edge Brightness 2. So if you double click on this one, you can make these edge highlights darker if you want. So if I bring that to the right there, if you want to make them lighter, just drag them to the left. You can play around with any one of these handles here. It will create a different look. But by default, it was down to the right a little bit, just to add some darker details, darker edge details to your result. So Edge Highlights 3, similar to Edge Highlights 2, except we'll just add some edge highlights in slightly different areas. You can double click on this levels adjustment layer and again, just play around with these handles to explore different looks. Next, let's take a look at the Detailed Textures folder here. So I'll just minimize that. So this folder here in purple. So if I turn this one on and off, I might just hide the edge highlights for the moment. So if I turn that on and off, you can see what that's doing. So with it off, it falls down onto the large textures here. Okay, so you can see it loses a lot more definition. So I'll turn it on. Okay. So again, you can control the amount of definition you want in areas by using the mask. By default, if I go inside this mask here by holding down Alt and clicking on the mask, you can see that, by default, I have only made the detailed textures appear where there is the most amount of detail within that photo. So you can see the areas in white I identified to have the most amount of detail, so that's where it'll appear. The least amount of detail in black, so the textures won't appear in that area. So if I click out of this, so if I hold down Shift to disable this mask, you can see that the detailed textures have been applied everywhere. Okay, so it's basically hiding the large texture folder here. Okay, it's just showing a little bit, but with this mask on, it creates a blend between detailed textures and less detailed textures. So if you want to, control again where the detailed textures appear, just use this mask, hit B. Okay, let's just say I don't want any detail up the top right here. I'll make sure black is my active color because I want to hide what's inside this folder, and I'll just brush that away. Now I don't want any much detail around the edges here. Brush that away up the top here. All right, so I'll turn on the edge highlights. So let's go inside the detailed textures folder here. So there are just two layers. One of them is sort of the base effect, and then this one will just add slightly smaller strokes, so it'll add a bit more definition. So pretty simple setup. So just explore, being creative with where you want the, I'll turn it off for a moment, where you want the detail to appear. Okay, I just like to quickly turn it on and off to see how it looks in areas with less detail. And then I'll just try to be as creative as I can by using the mask and brushing areas away. Okay. So the large textures folder, if you go inside here, there are 8 different textures here. You can experiment with, I'll just turn these off actually. You can experiment with, turning some off, okay, that will create alternate looks. Or you can sort of reshuffle these around, that will again create a different look. All right. Pretty simple. That's all you can really do with these. You can experiment with changing their blend modes, of course. This top one is set to lighten. You can see if I set that to normal, that changes the look. So yeah, lots you can do here. You can experiment with the opacity. Next, let's take a look at the reveal original photo layer in orange here. So by default, the layer is hidden, so you can see the mask is in black. So if you want to reveal some of your original photo details, select the mask, hit B, make sure white is the active color. You can hit X to make sure white is the foreground color. Now when I start brushing, you can see that I'm revealing the original details of my photo. Okay, so I rarely use this layer, but there might be instances where you just need to add a bit more of the original photo's definition. You can use this layer to do that. All right, I'll just hide that for the moment. So let's jump to all these grey layers at the top here. These are the overall adjustment layers. So for example, this one here is called overall color saturation. So if you double click on this, you can see by default I've turned up the color vibrance of your result. So if I turn it back down, you can see that. You can turn it all the way up. You can also experiment with the color saturation here. All right. Next up is the overall contrast too. I've got in brackets here opacity. So you can just adjust this layer's opacity here. I'll just turn that up and that will add contrast quickly into your artwork. This is just a simple levels adjustment layer. So you can quickly affect the overall brightness, contrast of your artwork. This one here, shadow brightness, I've got in brackets here opacity. So if you turn that up, that will add brightness into your into the darker areas of your photo. So if you notice that there's lots of dark areas, you can just use this slider to boost that up. This layer here, by default, is turned off. Okay, it's called color changer, and I've got in brackets, I think it was, yeah, double click and then select randomize. So if I turn this on, so this is an experimental layer for you to change your overall colors. So what you can do is just double click on this, and if you click on this color bar here, this gradient, and if you click this button here, randomize, that will apply a different color look every time you click randomize. Okay, which is pretty cool. I mean, you can also experiment with changing the color model here. That will sort of give you more color options. So let's just say I like that one. I'll click OK. You can also experiment with ticking reverse here. That'll just reverse colors. So these pink and reddish tones will appear in the shadows, and towards the highlights here, these bluey greeny tones. Okay. So what you can do here is, by default, I've got the blend mode set to soft light and the opacity at 50%. So you can experiment if you only want a little bit of that color. So I can add, say, or hit 2, that'll add it to 20% opacity. You also change the blend mode. Okay, that'll create different color options. So this layer here is just for you to experiment if you want. The only other layer we have here is the background color. So this is helpful if, say, you use this technique of isolating your abstract painter result to a particular zone. It then falls down onto the background color here. So you can just change the color of your background here, or you can move your whole abstract folder around, okay, just like that. So what I might do is actually turn on I think I've got the white highlights turned off because that was looking pretty good. think that looks good. Okay, now some tips for sort of overall, fine tuning adjustments. What I like to do here is, firstly, I'll save it. And what I'll do, I'll select the top folder here. And what I want to do is create a snapshot of everything I see here and put it onto one layer. So to do that, I'll hold down Control Shift Alt E or Command Shift Option E. So that's just merging everything we see onto one layer. So at the top here, so I'll move that around. Next, what I want to do is right click and convert this to a smart object. What this will allow me to do is now when I apply sort of filter effects to this, I can re-edit them if I change my mind later on. So what I like to use here is the Camera Raw filter. So if you go to Filter, Camera Raw filter, this is where I like to apply some further overall adjustments. Okay. You can do things like increasing the clarity. So I'll just exaggerate this so you can see what's going on. So that can add a lot more definition. So I just like to use a little bit of clarity, texture. You can see what that's doing. You can reduce texture if you want or increase it. Add just a tiny little bit of texture. Again, you can explore more color vibrance. I think it looks good with a bit more vibrance. And then you've got all these handles here, so you can target, adjusting the brightness of your darker tones and then your highlights. So have a experiment with adjusting these handles, get something that you like. Another tip is if you click on this icon here, Browse Profiles, you've got a bunch of other color options here. So if you say expand artistic, you can just move your mouse over these and that will give you different looks. And the cool thing about it is that, say if I click on this one, I can use this amount slider. So if I drag it to 0, so that's what I previously had, and I can just use a little bit of this color profile. So I'll click close to apply that. And lastly, what I like to do is I just head into the presets here. You've got some more color presets here. That one looks really good. So what I like to do is I just move my mouse away on and off that when I think I've found one that I like, sort of just compare it against what I have, and maybe I just leave it how we have it. But what I like to do here is down the bottom here, I just like to add a little bit of sharpening, maybe light or medium, maybe medium, and also explore adding some vignetting to it as well, maybe light, and I'll click OK there. So you can see now we have this Camera Raw smart filter here, so I can turn that on and off, compare the before and after. Okay, you can also excuse me, adjust the overall opacity here, so I can create a blend between, so I put that at 0%, and as I increase the opacity, we move towards the changes that we just made, so I can use a blend between the two. One other option I like to explore is shadow highlights. So if we go to image adjustments, shadow highlights, okay, I'll just reset this. This is another way you can sort of boost the brightness of the shadows here. You can also decrease the brightness of the highlights. This one here. Mid-tone is usually an interesting one to experiment with. Typically I like to lower that down just a fraction. You can explore that color option here, this color adjustment. Looks pretty good. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So lastly, before we move on to the next example, we'll just go through what the free paint action does here. So if I close this Photoshop file down and then reopen it and then go to free paint on this layer again, it's not going to work. So let's just demonstrate that. So I'll just close this down, Control or Command W, and I'll go File, Open, and I'll just open the file with just the artwork we just created. So I'm just going to hide this top layer for the moment. Now I'll go down to the free paint layer. Now when I press Y and start brushing, you see it just brushes in white. Okay. So if you close down your Photoshop file and reopen it, you must run the free paint action to create a new free paint layer. So with that selected, I'll just press play. And this first message is just basically telling you what I just told you then, that this is going to create an additional free paint layer, and if you close your Photoshop file down and reopen it, you need to run this action. So you just click continue, okay, and now this will create the free paint layer. Now this is an optional step here. It's basically telling you that firstly that the brush settings window should pop up again. Okay, so you want to click continue here, and you want to make sure that invert is turned off, okay, and also that the texture thumbnail is set to your most recent, the photo that you're using. If you run this action on other photos, you'll have other thumbnails from different images that you've used, so you can just delete older ones. So I can just right click and go delete that, okay, so I'll just select this one here. And now you'll notice that the free paint layer has been created at the top here. I can actually turn this back on. And now when I press Y, I can start brushing again. Okay. Now you'll notice that there's a variation in the color here. Now the reason why this is happening is because this free paint layer always looks at the original colors of your photo. So if I just duplicate my background layer and bring this to the top, it's looking at the colors from the original state of your photo. So what you might want to do in this case is just shut off the this layer here where we created the color look and added some sharpness. I'll turn that one off. So now when I start free painting, okay, just make some changes here. So say I'm happy with that. What I might want to do is then merge everything visible again onto one layer. So Control Shift E or Command, Control Shift Alt E or Command Shift Option E. Right, I'll right click and convert that to a smart object. Now what I can do, I can copy these smart filters to my new layer here. So holding down Alt or Option, I can click on these and drag them up. That'll copy the shadow and highlights, and I can grab the camera raw filter and I'll drag that up there. Alright, that covers everything. So let's check out the before and after. So I'm just going to shift select all the way down to the background color here and Control Command G to group all those, and now I'll just turn that group on and off. So there's the original, and there is the abstract painter effect with really doing minimal work to it. Alright, let's open up a new photo and we'll go through the process of running back the action and see what result we get. Okay, so here's the next example. So the first thing I'm going to check is the size of this photo. So I'm going to go to image, image size, and so this is a good size photo here. So again, I recommend taking the longest dimension of your photo and increasing that to in between 4,000 to 5,000 pixels. So click OK here. Next, I want to open up the actions panel, select the play abstract painter, and I'm going to click play. So again, the first step is to just create the texture overlay. So I'll click continue, I'll hit enter, and I'm going to select a texture, just select any texture here. Okay, again, you can experiment with adjusting the scale, the opacity here, or the blend mode. I'll just click OK. So next step is to brush away any unwanted texture details. So maybe a little bit around the bottles here. Right, with that done, you just click play. And the next step will be to adjust the brush settings. So I'll wait for that window to pop up. So here it is here, step 3, texture brush settings. So the brush settings window should pop up for you now. So you click stop. So if the brush settings window hasn't appeared, you go to window, brush settings, and it will pop up. So again, the step here is to ensure that the lock symbol is down, okay? And what you want to do is click on this thumbnail here and make sure that the photo, to select the thumbnail of the photo that you're currently using. If you can delete any unused thumbnails here. So this was from the previous example. So I can just right click and delete that one. You don't need to do that, but it's just nice to keep this clean. So I'll select the thumbnail or the photo that I'm using. Next is to make sure that invert is unchecked. Okay, so turn invert off. That's very important. Now I'll open the actions panel and click play to resume the action playback. So I'll skip the video ahead to the final step. Okay, so here's the step where we just need to click invert. So here you click stop, make sure the invert checkbox is on, open up the actions panel and then click play, and that's it. And then the action will complete in a minute or two. Alright, so the action's finished, so I'm just going to click continue here. This is just this message about free painting, so I'll click continue. Let's zoom up a bit here. So with the free paint layer selected, if I wanted to, or if you wanted to, you can just start now clicking around your artwork to add additional paint strokes if you want. So a few little things I might change here is I might select the edge highlights folder mask here and remove the edge highlights around here, maybe around here as well. Maybe there's some little bits of white that I don't, maybe remove this bit here. Let's take a look at maybe boosting. I'll drop the opacity of these bump textures down to maybe 20%. So I'll shift select both of these, hit 2 on the keyboard. That'll lower that. Maybe 40%, 30%, 30%. Okay, I might remove these edge outlines here, these edge highlights. So hit B, make sure black's active, brush those away. I want to undo that, so I'll hit X, make sure white is active, so I can paint that back. Okay, let's explore the shadow brightness to see how that looks. Maybe a little bit more contrast. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. I might just turn off the the detailed textures folder, see how that looks. Might zoom out a bit here. So basically what I'm looking for is are there any areas that could look good if I remove the detailed textures from it. But I think it all looks, maybe I'll brush black up the top here, remove some detailed texture from the top here. But I think that's looking pretty good. So again, what I like to do at the end is I'll select the top layer here, and I'll merge everything onto one layer. So Control Shift Alt E or Command Shift Option E. I'll right click, convert that to a smart object. Let's check out the shadow and the highlights first. So Image, Adjustments, Shadow, Highlights. And let's maybe 1%. Probably don't need to. Let's check out the mid-tone. Color. Okay. Right, next let's go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. Add a little bit of clarity. Oops. Just wiggle these sliders around a little bit to see if there's something I prefer. Maybe boost these highlights up a bit. Let's check out these color profiles. Let's have a look at modern. I think what we've got is pretty good. I'll click close there. And lastly, I will just add some, I'll check these ones out. I'll just add some sharpening. A little bit of vignetting, click OK. And there we go. So I'll turn that on and off so you can see the difference. Just a few little adjustments have really made that pop a lot more. And that's it, we're all done. So I'll turn these off. So there's the original and there is the abstract painter effect. Alright guys, that pretty much covers everything. I'll leave some time codes down below for your reference if you need help with a particular section. I'll also leave a link to my support page down below if you need assistance with this item or any other of my photo effects. But if not, have a good time using this effect. Thanks.